Team, welcome to the first day for our first project for the new November 3rd QTP training batch. Thank you for being here, and here is the quick agenda of what we're going to do today. I'm going to give a very quick overview about the kind of topics and how we will flow through these live webinars for the next 4 to 5 weeks. What's going to happen typically in every week, and how we're going to go about mastering the whole HP Quick Test Professional automation tool. All right, team? So before I get started on the tool, I have prepared a very short presentation with about 4 or 5 key slides giving you a quick overview. So I'm going to walk you through this, and then we'll get started with our training part. Okay. So team, basically I've split it into about 4 weeks. The week 5 and beyond I'm going to quickly mention at the end, but what we will start off, unlike the other earlier training batches, is I will no longer spend time on the basic fundamental record and run kind of a things. The reason being, these have been extensively being watched from my free demos on YouTube. I will send each of you the links if you haven't watched them. It's a good idea to go through those standard day 1, 2, and 3 to get a good overview. However, I still assume that participants are absolutely new, so I will not take it very complicated to begin with, but as we go about, I'm going to extend things. So the week 1, in fact, starting from today, I will focus on how do we create a data-driven automation framework from scratch. From absolutely nothing, how do we go about building it? That's what we will focus on. As part of developing this framework, we will also master extensively the VB scripting coding part. How does QTP actually work in the background? What are different methods that we will use? How do we interact with Excel? How do we write VB script functions, parameterizations, and so on? All right. What I will also introduce, team, going forward are assignments specific to each week completion. I will try and create tests that you can try and take for every week, and I will also present some interview questions for you to review as you go along. All right. But team, please do note, this is an absolutely focused training on the most important aspects of HP Quick Test Professional, that is the scripting, the coding part, and the frameworks. Everything will fall as part of it, and I assume that you coming as an absolute beginner, so that's where we will start from the very ground, and we will go advanced. All right. So team, give me one quick second before I diverse very briefly into the chat messages. There are certain participants who are not able to hear, so I've sent the instructions over that. So let's see what happens with it. All right, team. So that's week 1. What is data-driven framework? How do we develop, and so on. The week 2 is we will apply the same data-driven framework concept on a different application, different project. Then we will quickly go into developing something called as a keyword-driven framework and enhance our learning. So all that we've applied and learned in week 1, we're going to quickly apply it at the beginning of week 2 and go to the next level. The week 3, we will take a more advanced keyword-driven framework, and we will develop a completely script-free framework using descriptive programming. What is a script-free framework? We will come to it at length, but primarily the focus is once the framework is built, we do not have to go back and make significant changes at a code level whenever the application goes through the changes. So all of this, we will be working towards the end on that. Finally, I will end up with a hybrid framework, and as time permits and if possible, I will also show you how we could create these frameworks using a database instead of using an Excel. As part of all of these topics, team, what you master, or the number one thing that I'm trying to communicate over to you, is I am trying to give you an absolute confidence that you are the master on the tool. What you have to do parallelly in support of this is to practice along with either these live webinars or as you watch the recorded sessions. 70% of my participants are absolutely only watching the recordings. They're not able to attend the live, and that's fine, because this is the same content that is there everywhere. Your questions will come when you practice, and that's where you'll connect with the 1,000+ old participants in my Google group and post your questions there if it's not already answered. All right, team. So that's a quick overview about the agenda of what we're going to do. Apart from these live sessions, I am going to constantly refer you to my folder on screencast.com, which each of the confirmed participants will get invited to. And in there, I'm going to tell you which videos to watch before the next session. So for example, in the next few days, when we come back for the day 2 till day 5 of next week, you have to have certain basic knowledge on some of these. And what I would recommend are the basic QTP VBScript basics out here, and also the very important function basics and how do we read and write from Excel. So I will be sharing these new set of playlists that I've created based on different topics for QTP, and you'll have access to it apart from a few of the earlier live recordings. All right. So as mentioned, team, each of these sessions will get recorded and will get hosted. You could go back and review them as it happens. Okay. So the demo is primarily, though I call it a demo, it is still the day 1 of the training. We get straight away into learning QTP. All right. To begin with, I will start with taking a very, very simple application so that the complexity is then left in trying to understand and master the tool. That's going to be our focus going forward. All right. So what I've done is I've started working on this new application called Edmunds.com since my last batch. So I'm taking this up as a good starting point, and then we'll move forward from there. All right. So let me give you a quick walk through of this functionality of this application, what it does, and then we will talk about getting into the VB scripting, automation, and everything. All right. So primarily, team, so far I've not done anything on QTP. It's just basic introduction, and right now I'm giving you the application overview. Let's assume for a minute that you are part of an organization that you've just entered, or you're joining a new project within your existing company, and you have an application which has a certain functionality. What is the functionality? What does it do? What is the purpose of this application? The part of the functionality that I'm taking for our assignments and for our learning purpose is I'm going to talk about the auto calculators. It's basically a very simple calculators for your auto finance. If you're looking forward, or a user of Edmunds.com is looking to make a purchase of a vehicle, he or she is able to come to this website and be able to see what is it that they can afford, or how much do they have to put in, what kind of rates are available, and so on. Basically like a shop around and be able to compare what will suit them best. So let's take a simple one like what can I afford, and look at what we have to do. So as a manual user, what is happening on this application is a user comes in and says that I am able to afford about $400 each month. So we type this information and click on the go button. Once I do that, I have the second page in which I have to furnish little more details to get the specific information that is needed. The first thing that I'm giving is a zip code. What is the zip code for this vehicle? Where am I trying to make a purchase? Because what may happen is some of the other fields may be dependent on the inputs that you give. Team, just give me 1 second, please. All right, team, sorry for the short interruption. But basically, what I wanted to mention is that the second page is where we are furnishing more details. We've already entered 400, and that got transferred from the first page in here. I can then select what kind of a loan term. Do I want to take a 48 months or 4 years? Do I want to put, let's say, 5.99% is what should be my finance rate based on the credit history that I have? Do I have a trade-in? Do I have an old car to give? And do I still owe something on that loan? And how much cash am I willing to put down. So these are basically parameters which are driving the functionality of this application. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that if I have an application, this is more like a calculator. It has certain pre-built formula behind it, which when you pass certain inputs into it, depending on what you pass, there is an expected output. And that's your application, and that's what it does. That's its main functionality. All right. So all that you do as manual users is to provide the inputs and be able to get the outputs and use them. Now, let's say that you belong to the organization admins.com and you're working in the testing department of their technology wing, and your primary responsibility is to make sure that when users are performing these steps, is everything going in a good direction? Are they able to make those entries? Are they able to get the results, and are the results correct or not? Right? So that's the functionality overview, team, as a manual user. All right, team, so far so good. And team, you could enter your questions in the chat as and when you have them. However, when I give a logical break during the whole lecture, I will take up the questions and address them so that we continue with the flow of the training meanwhile. So team, now what we're going to do is, what's next for us? What do we want to do? So to do that, I am going to use a simple Excel file to put the different steps that we're going to perform as manual users and insert them out here. So I said before we go into automation that here is my application. This is a basic functionality. The browser that I'm currently working on is IE9. That's my configuration for this. Okay. Then as manual test engineers, here is what we're going to perform. We're going to come to this application. We will go to the specific URL, start entering the values. We will process, it's not the loan application, process the loan calculator, get the results, compare the results, and then close the browser. And this, we have to do it for different sets of data. Why do I need to do this for different sets of data, team? If I know that I getting the results and the results are correct for this combination, it does not mean necessarily that it's all working good. Why? Because suddenly there could be a different user who has similar requirement, but some parameters change. Instead of 48 months, she's looking, let's say, for a 60 months period. And when she is going and preparing this calculation, the results are not coming up correctly, or there is an error in the processing. So unless we try and run this on different sets and combinations of data, we cannot come to a conclusion that this application is working correctly. All right. Hence, I need to be able to test this not for just one set of data, but changing sets of data. And that's what is basically our data-driven testing. Okay. When we automate it and when we develop a framework at the end of it, it will be called as a data-driven automation framework. But what we are continuing to see right now is the need to test this application for different sets of data. So here is what I have in plan. And in test data, what I did is I have some sample sets of data. I'm saying, let's enter different monthly payments. Let's enter different zip codes, different sets of terms, rates, trade-in, and down payment. Depending on each set of data that I have from column A to F, I expect to get certain values in column G, H, and I from the application. And finally, I can put a result out here saying it's a pass or a fail. That's the eventual conclusion of this. So far, we've been all talking about manual testing, performing this. So what does that mean? The user, if you are working in the manual testing of this application, the whole idea for you to be working on is come to this application, perform the steps, but each time take this value, read this value, put it out here, then click on go, change the zip code, change that term, the rate that we have, perform all of these steps, and then calculate the loan total, get those values and put it back here. What is the problem with this kind of a process of we doing it manually? Number one, it's very slow. It's not efficient. Okay, there is no efficiency for it. Okay. Second is tomorrow or next month when I have to repeat the same testing, because one small thing somewhere changed and you have to go back and test everything, you are having to repeat everything. So it is truly not reusable. Okay. The third most important criteria for this manual challenge, manual testing challenge in this case, is it may not be accurate. What do I mean? We are still human and we may make a data entry error. Instead of typing 90001, what if I type 9001? What would happen at that time? What if I enter an extra zero, I miss a specific set of data? So my accuracy is getting hit. So the thumb rule team, when we're trying to make any application move from manual to automation, we have to ensure that it is efficient, it has to be reusable, and it is accurate. By efficiency, I mean if I'm doing this as a process in 10 hours, my script should do it in 10 minutes. Not necessarily the same ratio, but it is doing it much faster. And if I want to reuse it, I should be able to use the same code with very minimal changes to it. Sorry about that. Finally, it is efficient and it is reusable, but if my automation process does not give me accurate results, then I'm failing. The combination of all three form your automation team. Okay, that's going to be your automation testing. Now, how do we do this? A very, very popular tool for over a decade now has been the Mercury Quick Test Professional, which is now HP Quick Test Professional, right? So we're going to look at how we're going to use QTP to do and perform the same steps, right? To teach a tool, I need to provide certain inputs. I need to answer questions. It is something that will listen to your instructions, but unless you ask the right questions, it cannot perform what you want. If a manual users look at this, yes, they can understand what it is. If an automation tool needs to look at it, it needs information as to how, where is this browser, what is the URL, what is the data, where is it located, which field should I enter, which data, where should I capture the results, what will I compare it with. Unless you go about answering these questions, it becomes a nightmare. Typically, QTP comes with a very simple step called record and run, which is the most least required thing in the market, called record and run, which is a very basic level. These are the steps. So let me show you very quickly what kind of a script gets generated in about 5 minutes time when I do a record process, and then we will go about doing it in the way we're supposed to develop a automation framework in a live environment. All right. So team, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to launch my Quick Test Professional, but I'm going to make sure that my IE is closed. After my QTP is up, that's when I will bring my IE back. Okay. So team, while this is happening, any questions so far? All right, team, so I'm assuming all's good. So let's get going. So let's quickly read through the steps that are needed. The first thing that I said is let's open QTP. Let's open a new test. We're going to do a record and run setting changes. Then we're going to start the record process, manually perform the above steps, stop the record, save the test, run the test. All right. Now what we're going to do is let's perform these steps on HP Quick Test Professional. The version that I'm using for this training team and what I would recommend each of you is to use version 10. If you have version 11, fair enough. But the same scripts that we do in 10, you can do it on 11. 11 is not significantly different from 10. It's just got additional connectivities built into it, and it's got a little more added features which I have not seen really a very strong practical essence, especially in the practical world. QTP in specific works only with your IE browser. You can also work with Firefox, but there's still a lot of unreliability depending on the version that you're using. So what I would suggest is stick with IE for it. It's not a cross-browser testing tool like your Selenium, which is. Okay. So what we will do, team, is at this point I have come to the blank test. This is as simple as going to file and saying new test, and this is creating my first look of the window. At this point, the first instruction that I gave in that Excel is let's go to Automation tab and click on this Record and Run settings. Out here, what I will specify is when the record or run session begins, let's go to edmunds.com/calculators. That's the URL using my IE, and that's the action that we're going to perform. So we're going to select this and apply it and say OK. At this point, team, I'm making sure that my IE is not open, and the reason for that is if my IE was open prior to opening QTP, QTP will have a tough time identifying objects in that application. The other important thing, team, is depending on the operating system that you use, there are security changes that needs to be done so that your QTP starts working correctly. All of this information is part of the welcome pack, would have already been sent to all the confirmed participants by now. So what we're going to do is now click on this record button. Observe what happens, team, as soon as I hit the record button. I see that my UI has changed for QTP. You see something called as an active screen and the script here, and the mode is changed into recording. So the mode at which currently QTP is that QTP is telling you that I am ready to learn what you want to do. So whatever I try and perform on the application, it will try and capture that and repeat it. So now let's try and replicate the same manual process. So let's say I'm entering a value called 450 here, and I hit a tab. As soon as I see that, there is one set of line getting generated. Now we're going to click on Go, and we will now move into the second page. At this point, let's say like I did earlier, I'm going to change the zip code. For every action that I perform, not just the mouse movements, but entering data, moving or clicking on buttons or images and so on, they are getting captured out here. Now let's say that I select a longer duration, and then I go and select a different finance rate. All of these things are getting captured, and QTP is trying to understand what is it that I'm doing so that it can learn, store the information, come back at a later point and be able to perform the same thing. Okay, just entering simple sets of data and hit on calculate. At the end of it, here is where I got the payment. I will leave the capturing of this information to the day 3 or 4, but what we're focusing on is the initial part of being able to at least enter the information directly using a script. What you see, team, right now is the generation of the basic VB script code that QTP did automatically when we did a record. All right. So now I'm going to close this, and I'm still under the recording mode. I'm going to stop this record. And this is my basic test created when we did a simple record. Next thing, I'm going to save this as, and I will put this within our new folder that I created, team, called C:QTP N3 for the November 3rd batch. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to say this is ed_record. Okay, save. So far what we did is we've taught QTP that here is what I'm going to do on the application, understand what I'm doing, and then so that when we hit on this button called run, QTP should be automatically able to perform it. Don't worry about the results. By default, put it to the temporary run results for now. Why? Because automation testing is of 2 parts. One is the automation part. The second is the testing part. Testing is very simple, but we have to focus on mastering automation. which requires programming, which requires framework, and a lot of significant knowledge about our logic, how we develop it. So this is what we will focus. Moving this into testing is just few steps ahead of it. So when we come there, we will go into it. Till then, use the second option, temporary run results. Click on OK. At this point, the instruction I've given to QTP is, QTP, you've learned some steps. Now try and repeat those same things and perform them. And as I do that, you will see that QTP is automatically performing these steps and has closed the browser. For every step, it made a entry or it performed something on the application and it moved on. And if you've noted, what took me probably about a minute or so took hardly 1 or 2 seconds for QTP to perform. So it's very efficient. As long as I give the right instructions, it's going to perform that. Okay. So team, that was a basic record and run, and my test is saved. So if I look at the structure of the whole thing, and team, here is what I strongly recommend for each of you. Go to my YouTube channel, and out here you will see QTP tutorial 1, 2, and 3. Watch these 3 tutorials, which expands a lot on these basics. Okay, watch them. It's a great thing to get the fundamentals clear through them. And there are many other tutorials that you could watch, but that's what you should try and focus on initially. Right. So let's take a quick peek look at what this code is, and then go about writing how we will build a data-driven framework, what are the steps for it, and going about doing it in that specific method, that specific direction. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is this is VB script. Each line performs a specific action or a specific activity, does something. When you do a record, the only advantage that I see is there's something called as an active screen. Active screen is like a screenshot that QTP takes of the application when we are performing a specific record step. So if I click on line 1, it's actually not showing anything. There is no active screen out here. See, okay, ideally what is supposed to happen, and in fact I saved it with active screen, don't know why it is coming up. Anyway, ideally what was supposed to happen is when I have my active screen selected from my view and I click on any specific line, it is supposed to show me a screenshot of that application. It is an absolutely optional thing to know, never needed, because what I wanted to show you, which didn't work on the tool right now for an unknown reason, is something I will not even touch going forward. So it is just a good to, and not even a good to or nice to know feature, it's just an available feature within QTP. That way QTP has many features. It's got some things called as checkpoints, it's got something called as actions, some transaction things, and so many different step generator, function generator, all of this, which is absolutely not needed. They are optional. Why? There is a problem when we do a record. The problem looks very theoretical when I explain to you. I would rather go about showing you how we do it in a typical live project and then show you the difference as to why was it more beneficial to do it through our own coding. Okay, so I'm going to save this and keep it aside. Now let's go back to our blackboard and design our automation steps. So I'm going to create a new sheet in here and say DDF plan. When I say DDF team, I'm saying data-driven framework. Okay, so I'm going to say what is the step, description of it, status of it. Okay, so just 3 specific columns to begin with. Then we will expand on it. All right, as and when we think we need more to put in here, we're going to do. So I'm going to write at a high level what is it that we expect to do over the next 3-4 days out here. All right, will this be something that we have etched in the stone that we won't deviate from? No, we may come and make changes to it as we go about, but it's a great starting point for this. All right, team. So let's look at what is it that I wish to develop. What I wish to develop is at the end of the next 4-5 days, we wish to develop a very efficient, reusable, and accurate automation framework called data-driven framework. Okay, each of these steps will be as part of it. Why is it? How is it efficient? How is it reusable? And why is it going to be accurate? End of it, this is what it should do. And whatever we've been doing manually, whatever I showed you that you typically the manual users may perform, we will let our script do it during using the automation testing. All right, team. Now let's talk about the first thing. The first thing, very important, team, is my plan up? Did I plan things? Do I have all the test scenario? What is it that I wish to test? Basically, when I say scenario, what is it that I'm planning to test? Do I have the test data ready? And I think this is good enough for the first one. Prepare, basically the description for this step is to prepare our test plan, scenario, and data. That's the initial target. Why? Extremely important, team, for each of us to try and plan things before we implement. Why? You're no longer doing manual testing. You're moving away from testing into more towards the zone of a developer. Always start thinking from now on as a developer would. And to do that, we need to go in a very systematic manner. Not that we don't go in a systematic manner and don't document when we do testing, but it is more essential because we will face challenges. The second thing that I need to do as part of this team is identify the objects from the application. Why should I identify the objects from the application? What are these objects? We're going to come to it. Third is, I will say, add the objects to the repository. What is this repository? Why should I add it there? We're going to come to it. Then create our VB script test parameters. What are these? What are these parameters or variables in VB script? 5 is write the basic code for the test scenario. Okay. 6 is apply the concept of VB script functions if needed. Then we will say create logic for verifying the test results from the application. 8, read test data from the Excel. 9, write the test results back to the Excel. Finally, run our test automation DDF or frame, whatever. Okay. So at a high level, team, this is what is coming to my mind. As I'm thinking right now, this is what is coming. As we go along, we may further customize it, but it gives me a good starting point and a good, more like a checklist of to-do things. Do I already have my test plan, test scenario, and test data? I have a high-level plan. I have a test data. So I would say yes, it's about 90% done. I'm going to put status out here. Okay. So this is good for me. Now, the next step is where we have to go, identifying the objects from the application. What are these objects? Why do I need to identify them? It's very simple logic, team. The logic is well explained in those videos that I'm referring you to, but primarily there are two things, questions that we need to answer when we're automating. First is called where, the second is called the what part. If I have to give instructions for HP Quick Test Professional to perform specific steps, I have to tell that where should it do a certain thing. For example, click on this button, click on the link, enter text here, do that, do this. Where should this action be performed? That is the first answer. And these are your objects, team. These are called as objects. QTP looks at everything as objects. And if you notice this, as you did a record, QTP has created and identified objects by a specific description that it has stored in a place called as repository. What I have highlighted in the code here is referring to one specific object within that application. Now, where did it store this object? It is stored in a place called repository. When you click on this colored stack of kind of a drum icon, you will open that. Every object that you see that is getting added in the script has been also stored in the object repository, so that if I have the application open on the side for me, I should be able to go and point to that. Okay, so let's say that we're talking about a specific object here. All right, the object is basically saying what is the class for that object, what is the name for that object, and what are the properties. Okay, those are the three most important things, team. What is the name for it, what is the class, and what are the properties for it. What is this class? Class defines basically what type of an object is it. Is it a cell phone? Is it a mobile? Is it a paper document? Is it your house? Is it a person that we're identifying? Or is this a web button or a browser or a page or an edit field or a text? In this case, since we're all working in the virtual world of an application over the internet, these are referring to the small bits of information and pieces that build up this whole application. Each of them referred to as an object. Then there are something called as child objects within a parent. What is that concept? That concept is very simple. Every object can have one or more child objects within it. For example, when you take a simple example like a house, within that house you have different objects within it, right? You have your electronics, you have your furnishing, then you have your people living in it, and so on. So if I identify a house, I can then identify the child objects or objects within that parent. For example, here what you see is that hierarchy mentioned. It is saying that the highlighted object here is a class browser and the name is called auto calculators. What is this name? When we did a record, QTP has automatically stored this. When we do not do a record and we flow through the data-driven framework process, we will automatically create these objects and add them to the repository and give our own logical names. So you could go here and change. So let's say that I want to say that this is an IE browser. The name for this browser, I want to change it to IE. As soon as I do that, team, and you click somewhere else, observe what happens to the code here. The code gets changed. The code here and what you see here are linked with each other. Okay, they're linked. And the way QTP works is going through each step. It first tries to identify that where part in the object repository, get that specific object, find out what type of a class it is, get the properties for it, and then go about searching for that specific object in the application. Once it does that, then it can perform the what part. So I need to answer the where and the what. So how do I do it if I am starting afresh? So I'm saying let's start a brand new test. I'm saving whatever changes were made with the record. I don't need anymore the active skipping. So before team, I start afresh with it. Let me see what question you have, please. Any questions, team, that I need to take at this point in time? Please put them over the chat to begin with. Manju, can zip codes be given randomly, which are meaningful, or where can we get the data from in the work environment? Good. So is this the entire possible set of information? No. It's a sample collection of a test data to build our framework and test that what we're doing is correct. Once we have done that part, I can then read the required set of information that my team thinks that we should run the test on and then perform it accordingly. It could be an Excel spreadsheet. It could be in a CSV file or an XML doc or a database. Does not matter. My QTP can be instructed to speak and interact with each of these files. All right. So Pratik, your question I've answered. Kashish answered your question that why we need IE open before QTP. And Joseph, yes, answered your question too. Let's see next. So Rakesh, QTP 11 supports cross-browser and Flash automation. So I don't really think it does. There are some improvements over 10, but not so much phenomenal set of improvements. Can I know what is the test scenario? Mahesh, the test scenario is mentioned at the beginning of the session. When I send you the recording, you can go back and look at it, please. What happens if IE is down? So good question. So what happens when the browser is down? Pratik, when I start on the next part of the session, let me know and I will repeat that part. Do I need 2 laptops to work on QTP as we go? No, I use one system. You could always use just one system and survive with it. Having 2 laptops is good for one simple reason that you're watching the videos on one and you're practicing on the other, but it is not necessary because I see a lot of people try and take notes, handwritten, and then they'll be able to do. So Pratik, when will this application fail? What will happen? We will coming to it. It's going to get very interesting with it. If it's not web-based application, it's Java application, how to start the application using QTP? Yes, we will come to some of those aspects. So team, the good part of what we're trying to learn is 95% of what we are learning is irrespective of the type of application. Is it a web-based? Is it an SAP application? Is it a CBEL or an Oracle or a Java-based Windows application and so on? It does not matter. Why? Because the crux of the whole automation is VB scripting, descriptive programming, frameworks, object identifications, and so on. All of this is still common. The only thing that changes is browser.page.webedit. Instead of that, you'll find something else specific to that application. That's the only difference. I'm going to come to Object Repository again. But team, as mentioned, please do watch those demo videos which goes in depth on these things before the next class. Currently, we are using only positive scenarios. Yes. So at the moment, I'm only using positive scenarios. What, instead of entering zip code 9001, I make a data entry error or I say 90001. What happens to the application at that time? Instead of saying 48 months, I say 4 years out here. What happens then to the application? So we will talk about when we enter what a user might genuinely and make mistake while entering the information, what happens at that time. We're going to come to some of them, Amrita. Is the automation framework important when we use descriptive programming, or it can be used for record and playback too? So Lele, the point is that automation framework and programming are important either way. Record and playback is an absolute no need thing in the market. If you look at anyone or any job, you will see that if you do a record and run, don't apply to this job unless you know scripting and frameworks. It uses descriptive programming or object repository, does not matter. But frameworks and scripting is very important. Then it is important to go for yes. So we will come to descriptive programming extensively, team. And just to let you know, there is a very, very large collection of videos around this area. Okay. For example, the descriptive programming topics, the fundamentals of it I've explained here in these 4 sessions. But more importantly, there are keyword-driven framework videos where we've built frameworks completely around using descriptive programming. Complete automation, keyword and hybrid frameworks built around descriptive programming. Tzilla. Okay, answering your question, what if QTP doesn't recognize the object? Yes, so we're going to come to those things. What happens when QTP does not recognize? How do we make it happen? What if it's dynamic? What languages? Only VBScript. What do you mean framework in QTP? So, and that's a good thing to do also. When you go to my YouTube library, I have some very, very interesting free sessions for you. You must watch them, irrespective of if you're a paid member or not. There is an overview video on what is a data-driven versus keyword versus hybrid framework in the YouTube. Must watch. So watch that. You'll get a good idea about what frameworks are all about. You get a lot of printable tutorials. All of this information, team, while I'm trying to take a lot of questions, which is not today's class related, but important diversions, I'm going to do that. You'll be given a membership to a Google group. As part of that Google group, you will be a part of this specific website where all these documents have been posted. They've got material on interview questionnaires, test planning, ebooks, tutorials, certification question and answer papers, everything that you possibly will need is already in here. So it's a huge collection of almost about 70 or 80 documents, a great collection. It is part of your welcome pack that comes to your team. Okay, and then the other part that you may wish to look at is going to be the Google group. There are two groups. One is for QTP, the other is for Selenium, and there are over 895 members so far in this group. So you will be interacting live with all of these members in there. Okay. All right, team. So let me go ahead with the remaining part of the session. I'm going to spend about 5-10 minutes because I want to make progress on this part. Identify the objects from the application. So to do this, the way we will proceed in our live environment is I've created a new test, and the first thing I need to do is tell QTP where my objects are. So team, do you remember I mentioned the place where QTP will store these objects earlier? What is that called? Correct. There is something called as an object repository. When we did a record, QTP automatically takes the objects and puts them in the repository out here. So let's open the repository and see what's there. It's blank right now. Why? If I keep this like it as is and I start a record process, okay, and as I do a record, you will see that the objects get added. Okay, let's see now. Do you see anything in the repository thing or anything in the script? It is under recording process, but you don't see anything here. But as I add or enter values, you will see the objects are getting added here and the script is getting generated. I am saying this exact process of adding this object into the repository and writing this code, we will do it physically and let not QTP do it automated using record. Why? Because you want to be in control of everything that happens in the application. All right? So I'm not going to save this. So I'm going to open up a new test. So click on new. Say no to saving this. Now let's start about creating our own thing. So the first thing I want to do is add the objects. Now let's look at the application and see what are the possible objects that we need. In this application, in the front page, I need this object. I don't know what it is. I don't know what name it will give. I don't know where it is present and so on. But all I have to do is click on this add objects to local. What this feature does, team, is when I click on this, my hand will change from being a simple arrow to more like a hand pointer when you do it on a hyperlink. But unless my application is in front, it's very tough. I can put my control key pressed and perform specific steps, or like a regular mouse, and then release the control key to get back that pointer. You may not see the pointer in the GoToMeeting, but when you practice on it, you will see the same thing. Now what I'm going to do is click on the object I want to add. Just click. What am I doing, team? If you notice, I'm adding the object to the repository. So now it says that there is this is a web edit. That's the one highlighted. It is a child within something called as a page object, which is under a browser object. And when I say OK, that's got added into my repository. But why was the code not generated? I didn't say what to do on it yet. I haven't written the code. We're going to write the code as the step 3, is it, that we have? Or step 4 or 5, somewhere out here. But first, I want to prepare my repository. Okay, I'm identifying and preparing. See, in fact, we're doing both of these steps parallelly. So just let's complete a little bit of progress on it. I've added one object. Now let's add the second object. Minimize all the windows. Open up your QTP. Open up your browser. Click on the plus sign, and let's click on the Go button. Now you see that there is something called as a web element Go, and that is under a web button Go, and which is under a page and a browser. I'm going to say OK. Blindly just keep adding everything. Now what do we do next? I have to go to the next page. What will I have done to go to the next page? Ideally, I would have entered a value and clicked on Go. Is anything getting generated here? No. because it is not in a recording mode. It is just in a standby mode. What we're performing is identifying those where part. Now I want the zip code. So click on add object, then select that object. Now do you see the difference, team? It is added, but it has added that on a different page. Why? Because we moved to a different page. QTP identified that there was a different page and it added that object. I will go about adding 2 or 3 more objects, team, and then we will see review why we did this. 4, 5, whatever we have here. Then let's take the loan term. Okay. Let's take the rate. Okay. Let's take the value of trade-in. Okay. And that's about it. Finally, what I'll do is let's click on the calculate button. Plus click on calculate. Now I have my objects ready in the repository so that I can write the code against it. But this is not the end point before we start writing the code. Why? The whole idea about we doing this process of adding objects instead of QTP doing a record and learning is so that we can customize it. I want to be able to identify what these objects are, how should we look at them when we see the script, and we will be in a very organized fashion. So this is a browser. Do you see this icon, team? This icon is for the browser, and that's the class and the name that QTP added automatically. That's called as your logical name. Now I'm going to change this name and say this is IE browser. I'm just changing the name. Nothing changes here. No code yet. That's the reason. This is my first page. So why not change the name of this page, class page. This is the name by default QTP has brought, and this is the icon for it. Page 1 is what I will say. This is my second page. So I'm going to go here and say page 2. That way, when I go back to the code, it will be easier for me to look at. Why is page 2 coming here in page 1 here? Isn't it going in alphabetical order? Interesting. Page 1, page 2. Okay, there you go. I have page 1 and page 2. Now, what did we do on page 1? What is this? It's a question mark. I'm not really sure if I remember correctly as to what this is. But I can see an icon for it. I can see it's a class for it, and I can see a name. But I'm really not confidently sure what it is. So let's go back to that page and tell QTP, can you highlight this object in the application? Select the object and then click on highlight in application. At this point, QTP should go and show you that where part in the application and be able to blink on it. And now you know, oh, okay, this is my monthly payment, correct? So what I can afford as a monthly payment. So calc default value, does it make sense of what value it added? What should it ideally be? Monthly payment. That's the number one advantage, team. When you add your objects and start working instead of a simple record process, what you're doing is able to manage the way every object is stored in a very systematic manner. Okay. Now what is this? Same thing, highlight an application. There you go. What is this thing? It's a button, go button, right? So go is good enough for us to identify. Or if I want it to be more explicit, I will say go button. Okay, so now I've customized the page 1. So team, at this point, we're already at the 6:30 p.m. So I don't want to extend my day 1 further. We're going to meet for day 2 either on Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to communicate why, so that I want you to go and watch the overview basic videos that I've trying to talk about on YouTube. Then you're coming more prepared for the next sessions. So team, any specific questions related to what we did today? Because that's what I would love to entertain at the moment. Melvin is in the repository where you check the log to check if the test pass or fail. Okay, there are multiple places where we will see if the test is pass or fail. When we do a data-driven framework, I want my results to come here and see which set of data was a pass, which one failed, and why it failed. Okay. There are other things in QTP inbuilt called as the test results, which come up out here, which is not, it's a good tool. It's not a useless thing, but we tend to do much more than just those basic results that we see. Let's see. QTP support remote desktop connection. I mean, is it possible to record from my desktop, install QTP to remote? So forget about recording, Chipan, to begin with. Okay. Talk about first creating your scripts. Create your scripts locally, make them, test them out, and then you can deploy them wherever you go. Right? But any questions which are for later part, I will try and not entertain because we are missing the flow of the training. If I want to play around QTP before second class, how can I get? So you can visit hp.com and download the trial version. They'll give you a 30 days trial from QTP 11 and you could use that. What happens when QTP does not recognize objects? Exactly. So what happens to that? How does the errors come up and what do we do about it? We're going to go into the next level. What is preferable? Just record and run script or define objects? Define the objects. Record and run is never preferable. Always. Can I install QTP trial version on Mac? Not sure, Tito, because I don't use a Mac. But you could post this kind of questions in the Google group. You'll get a lot of answers around those uses. QTP 9 is bad. That's not to practice. So because what we do in 10, you cannot take the same scripts and perform it on 9. When will you send this video link? So I have to convert the video. Then I have to upload the video. It will take me about 2-3 hours to do that, and then you'll get the video. If you change the names in the object repository when running, will it still identify it? Yes. So we will come to the Sunita. Yeah, Manju, that's the problem with the HP website. Typically, when you want to download the trial version, you have to create a passport and a lot of other things before you get going. So, yeah, that's the only solution for you there right now. All right, team. Thank you so much. I'm going to upload this on YouTube and I will also upload it on screencast so that you know and you can see how the actual videos will look and you could perform based on that. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for attending and I'll see you back in day 2. Take care, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you.